Okay, and
Hi,
rolling.
Scott Orlin with CINEMA-Magazin. Greetings from the Zurich Film Festival, where I bring you the talented and incredibly gifted actor, Joseph Gordon-Levitt.
Hello.
Yeah, last time I think we talked in Cancun, so we're international here as we speak about this. As with The Walk, once again you are playing a man, real life, here with Snowden. Both instances, they were not appreciated when they first did what they did. Mm-hmm. It took over the course of time for people to go, hey, wait a minute, with Philippe, that's pretty cool. Mm-hmm. Do you think a movie like this will enlighten people to feel the same way about Edward Snowden?
Well, you know, when Oliver Stone first offered me this job, at first I was just excited because it's Oliver Stone and he's made so many great movies, you know. But the very next thought I had was, okay, wait, Edward Snowden. I know I've heard that name somewhere before, but which one's he exactly, and what exactly did he do, and why? And I realized I didn't know that much about him. You know, you hear so many things in the news, but it's rare that I take the time to really dive into depth. And the Snowden story is a complicated one. If you want to really know much about it, it takes some time. So I think a lot of people are just like I was. You know, you've kind of heard of Snowden, you know it's controversial, you know that some people don't like him, you know that some people do like him, but if you're the kind of person that likes to form your own opinion, you're like, I don't even know necessarily. I would hope that this movie is a good place to start, to understand him as a human being, to see, you know, what he was doing in his life for the 9 years leading up to his decision to do what he did, and see why he made that decision.
Were you given access to talk to Edward, or I know Oliver did, or did he want to keep the two of you away from each other for a bit?
Oliver went to Moscow a number of times, along with his co-writer Kieran Fitzgerald, and Ed actually gave a lot of input on the script. They brought me on one of those trips, and so I went to Moscow, and I sat with Mr. Snowden, as well as his longtime girlfriend Lindsay Mills, who's played in the movie by Shailene Woodley. And we talked for about 4 hours there, just in an office. And it was valuable for me because, you know, I could read about his positions, I could read about, you know, the actions that he took. But sitting face to face with someone, that's how you can really observe those little human details, how someone sits or stands or walks or talks. And those nuances are you know, that's what really allows you to craft a performance.
So I'm excited right now. You're itemizing the nuances in me right now, so this is kind of cool. You know, one of the things that the more information we're allowed and more access to we learn about, the more paranoid we can become, because not only do we have that information, but as we see in this movie, other people can get that information. How sensitive has it made you about the use of technology, knowing what the government can get access to?
I think it made me more thoughtful just in general about how the internet works, how a lot of this technology works, and not just in terms of government mass surveillance, although there's that, but you know, our data is being collected at least as much as the government by other companies, you know, big technology companies, and they're not necessarily doing anything bad with that information. Not necessarily, but it's something I didn't even used to be aware of. You know, nowadays when I check that box and agree to the terms of service, you know, you're always asked to sort of like agree to these contracts. I never used to really think about it much. I just agree and kind of move on. Nowadays I do take a minute. I can't say I read all of that legal language. I don't think you probably even can understand it unless you're a lawyer, and that's probably a problem. But you can spend a minute to think to yourself, and this is what I do. I'm like, okay, who is this company? How do they make money? How might they be making money off of me? What might they be doing with my data? I never used to ask myself those questions. And you know, this technology is so new. We don't really have a culture or a protocol or what's the wise way to make use of it. And I do think that, you know, after Edward Snowden did what he did, we all became a little wiser.
And let me ask you, hopefully not putting you too much on the spot, all throughout our lives we witness things that maybe we shouldn't witness, and most of us don't do anything. Edward Snowden was a man, they used the term whistleblower. Has there ever been an instance in your life where you've, I hate to use the word whistleblower, but maybe be that, where you've stepped up maybe against the tide because you felt you needed to do the right thing or say the right thing?
Not in any way that I could compare to Edward Snowden. I mean, he risked his life. I've never risked my life for anything. And I know what it's like to take the easy way out. I remember you just made me think of, in 9th grade, we would always have these spelling tests and everyone would cheat. I mean, every last person in that classroom cheated. And I remember for a while I didn't want to. But after a while I did, because I was like, well, these are graded on the curve and everyone's cheating, so I guess I will too. And I think back on that sometimes and I'm embarrassed. I'm sort of ashamed. Not that there was anything that virtuous about those spelling tests, but I don't know. I like to think of myself as someone who doesn't cheat, and I know what it's like to kind of. I mean, that's obviously a very small and sort of trivial example, but
say it ain't so, Joe.
Yeah,
say it ain't so.
Yeah, but I know the feeling of like it'll just be easier to just kind of go along and do the easy thing. And Edward Snowden definitely could have done that. This is a guy who is living in Hawaii, working for the NSA, making really good money, living with his longtime girlfriend that he was very much in love with. He had a great, comfortable life, and he could have kept going with that. But he felt ethically obligated and obligated to his country to stand up for the principles that, that our country is founded on. And every day he was going into work, and I've heard him say this, every day I was going into work and violating my principles, going against, what makes my country so great, and I had to do something about it. I have a lot of courage. I mean, he had a lot of courage to do that, and I have a lot of admiration for it.
You have a lot of courage because you're sitting here talking to me. I think that's a lot of courage. Last quick question for you, and that is, what do you hope at the end of the day? I mean, right now there's all this debate, will Obama pardon him before he leaves office? Do you hope there is a transition for Edward Snowden? Do you hope that the movie will be an enlightenment for a lot of people? Because there are just hardcore people on one or both sides that do not want to budge about this issue.
It's true, and it's maybe a bummer, but it's a fact that human beings don't like to change their minds, and that's true on both sides. But I think probably most people are like I was before Oliver offered me this job. Kind of heard of Edward Snowden, but you don't necessarily know that much about it. And I do think I hope that people will come out of the movie theater having seen this movie talking about it. And I think those conversations are good. And look, you can think that mass surveillance is a good thing. You can think that mass surveillance is a bad thing. That's a complicated debate, and there's lots of arguments on both sides. But I think it's pretty certain that it's good we're having that debate. That's what makes a democracy. That's why I'm so grateful to be born and raised in the United States of America, where we can have those conversations. A lot of people live in countries.
Well, at least for a few more months. We don't know what's going to happen in November, but we think it's going to keep happening.
I mean, you're right, and it could be a real bummer in the United States. And I'm no fan of the presidential candidate I think you're alluding to. But look, even in that case, let's be honest. There's people who live in other places in the world where the oppression is way, way worse, where you can't have this kind of conversation, especially not on camera, where you ask that question, is the government doing the right thing? That's a privilege. And I feel very grateful to be able to, exercise that right. And I think a lot of people will feel the same.
Well, it's been a privilege once again to talk to you, Joseph. As always, thank you so much.
Thank you.
This is Scott Orlin. Until next time.
There you go.
Look at that.